Okay, it's turn 56, and with any luck, this may actually be the final turn that I actually have to do for this game. I hope. Fingers crossed. Let's talk through it. We got to see some really big assembled armies this turn, and it was really quite satisfying. But there's one thing from the events list. There's two things from the events list I want to talk about before I show the storms that happened. The first is we sent out a message to the world. This message is basically, you can read it, but everyone in Discord's getting very antsy about the fact that I'm about to win. So I figured one way I can buy myself time is basically by, just admitting it. Yes, we're attacking, and if you want to come for us, come for us. Trying to make it as in character as possible, but talking about underplaying how quickly we can do it. So I've said within the next 6 turns, I actually think I can do it in 1 to 2. Maybe this buys us just a little more time if something goes wrong, but it is admitting that what is obvious is happening. We've revealed our hand. We've revealed that we're rushing, so, that's that. The second thing is I cast Flames from the Sky, but I did it on Ermor's large army this time. Ermor tends to have very large armies that are very vulnerable to Flames from the Sky because they're low HP undead for the most part, and their mages are also, not super squishy, but somewhat vulnerable. Anyway, 835 units were killed. Oh man, now there's 1,000 left, but that felt good. Just thinning the herd a little bit to cover my ass, as the case may be. Oh, also, someone tried to launch some sort of teleport against one of my thrones, and the mage died. So we'll never know what the spell was, because the spell doesn't work if the mage dies as a result of the Dome of Flaming Death. Or at least that's my understanding. So maybe it was a recon spell, maybe it was a teleport attack intended to lock the throne down, I don't know. But that happened. Let's have a look at some really big battles and then some battle reports elsewhere. So this is our assembled force. So this is the Grand Army of Nazca. This is my biggest, most capable force. So it is lots and lots and lots of Hartoon Runa, a couple of Huakas on bodyguard duty, a core of Condors that are spread out to make sure that if Evos drop in at any given spot, they don't take all the damage, I guess, unless it lands here. There's a Sapphire blob here, and then I've spread out a Mage Core. So we've got an Enchantress boosted to Nature 4. We've got a whole mess of Huron Priests. We've got a couple of Koyas geared, obviously, with temporary Astral Pearls. Everyone's got heaps of gems at this point to support multiple cases, to resist gem baiting. He's got this. It seems clear that there were significant casualties among the Geomancers, because I count 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2 Crystal Mages. I think they suffered significant casualties. It's hard to tell how many. There's also some Crystal Mages, and so not nothing, but very, very few units by comparison. We've got Light of the Northern Star up by a banner, and here is Astral 8 Endgame, the Seraph, all of their gems, and let's just see how the battle goes. So the first volley of crossbow bolts comes out, everyone flies, and then time stops. Time stops while the birds are still in the air. And you can see some evocations flying. Anyway, Endgame is preparing to cast Phoenix Pyre. 40 fatigue for time stop, which is pretty incredible. The birds are falling in slow motion and commencing the attack. Fog Warriors comes down as the troops are landing. Endgame prepares to cast Will of the Fates. I haven't put this in slow motion, by the way. This is just how the world looks to everyone except for that. Okay, Will of the Fates has gone down, 105 fatigue. That'll be a 1-turn nap because 15 reinvigoration. And at this point, we have everything we need. We don't have Army of Gold yet, but we've got Will of the Fates and Fog Warriors, which is significant enough that we can deal with anything, including dropped rocks. Anyway, so I'll put it in full speed. The time stops, and at that point, there's firestorms and Mr. Deception, whatever. We were way over geared for this fight, but that is fine. The result was we lost 2 Huron Priests and 2 Hartoon Runas. I believe we lost them to... I'm not sure what we lost them to. I won't go in and find out. I'm not sure whether we burned out the Communion, or whether the enemy were lucky with crossbow bolts. Anyway, we killed everything that was here. which was 11 mages and some troops, but most importantly, we took the throne. Now, we're not patrolling this turn. We're not. We're preaching, we're defending, and we are throne claiming. We're claiming the throne with this guy here because I think we're fairly safe. I think I'm using two. So yeah, I've got two claims going on in case one is assassinated or remote attacked. And then all the preaching is to break down this as quickly as possible. I'm also building a temple to get Wrath of God over this province if this drags on. In Dunster, we lost 11 condors, but we seized the fort, which is what we wanted. We seized this province without loss. We seized this province without loss. So we're ripping apart Tianqi's northern flank here, and we're going to continue to move. Shinuyama has moved up and broken 320. Facia continues to advance and has broken 34. Shinuyama's taken 3. So this is all... It's all falling apart for Headalus. These guys could probably handle him alone, I reckon, with the evocation support I've provided. Meanwhile, we're just dashing back and forth. Yis has retracted their statement, said, yeah, nah, I was just posturing. I understand how it could be taken as a declaration of war. It sounded like one, so all's fair, but I didn't mean it. Now, I thought it was pretty unambiguous, but look, I'll take it. I'll pull back and confirm our peace deal, because that's just as good to me as owning these provinces. So we'll withdraw. We didn't lose anything. We just moved in and we just skelly spammed and killed him with Sapphires, so that's fine. We're going to continue to corral Ermor right up until the end. And then we also assembled another big army. So this is the army that we concealed by having it chase Ermor everywhere as we steadily added more and more mages. And then we added a Royal Marquis who just walked in at the last moment. So similar sort of thing. We've got some nature mages, with one with a crystal matrix to boost her up. Huron priest. This is not as grandiose as the other one, but like Sumi, I had to pull it together relatively quickly. Anyway, that seized the province from Ulm, destroyed the fortress that was under construction, I believe. So now we have to hold it. Now there is a laboratory here. So, to help hold it, we're casting Dome of Arcane Warding, Dome of Flaming Death. This guy's claiming the throne, and this guy's casting Wizard's Tower. And Wizard's Tower will put up a fortress here, which will mean, I believe, the fort will go up before ordinary movement takes place. Now, it'll have wall strength 0 and it will be broken, but I think that buys us time. So I think if we claim both of these this turn, which we should, I don't think there's a way we lose this. I don't think there's a way we lose this. Is there anything else I need to cover this turn? I don't think so. There's a bunch of raiding back and forth. You can see, as I said, Facia, Shinuyama, Tianqi going at it. But there's not really much more for me to say at this point. Like, yes, there have been casualties. Yes, I'm going to continue playing. I'm going to play this turn as if the game will go for another 10, but I think I've done it. I think this massively over-engineered push will hold here, and I think Ulm's screw-up over here, which he was clearly not... So he's moved troops in now, but like this is not enough. This is not enough, and I'm going to fort this anyway. He wasn't ready. He was expecting 2 more turns notice. He was expecting, I assume, that when I cancel his nap, his troops are, I believe, based around here to begin rolling up and countering me with something akin to the forces he has trashing Vanarus down here, which he's continued to trash Vanarus with because there's no way he'd get them to the border in time, so he figured he may as well finish that war over there. I can see that they're almost besieging the hall, so clearly he's doing well against everyone except for me. But like I think that's academic at this point. I think the fact that like this war between Asphodel and Machaka, which Asphodel appears to now be winning, like props to Smokey the Carrion Bear, right? Like Smokey has come back from just his capital to is now besieging 2 Machakan forts as the game ends. Also, we agreed that this is former Smokey territory, and Smokey demanded this back or he would get in on the war. And you know what? This area, like, I could probably handle Smokey, but I don't want to risk it. I don't want to risk it. Like, if he pulled all this chaff back, I don't know. I don't think it's a problem, but like, Epernia is right here and his primary army is here, and I think I could fend him off, but why take the risk? So yeah, sure, he can have Doral Woods and its Death Gem back. Cool. So we're breaking siege and retreating which will allow him to then take the fortress. Fine by me. So yeah, that's the turn. We're getting our gem reloads in. We're moving as many reinforcements, particularly into Bakar, as possible. So we're bringing in more Sapphire. We're bringing in a bunch more mages. Oh, so last game, this is a tradition, I suppose, of all two of my games. When you defend your thrones at the last possible minute, you pull your research core in. So what we've done here is I've issued every Akla one fire gem, and that one fire gem will be used to Phoenix Power, and then Pillar of Fire. So there's a whole bunch of Pillar of Fire casters coming in, and they'll be good for exactly one cast. But I think that's all they'll need. I think if he sends in ritual tier attackers, they'll fight the ritual attackers, and this many casts against what are probably a relatively small number of teleporters. Like if golems teleport in, Pillar of Fire will mess them up, man. Like Pillar of Fire will mess them right up. It's not as good as GC's Arcane Bolt strat, but hey, I don't have that available to me because I don't have 7 unscripted Lizard Shamans of the Lizard Shaman Master Race. So I will make do with what I've got, move my research core in, and defend as best I can. And we'll see how it goes. I think I've got this. But give it a turn and we'll see. Okay, here we are, one turn later, but many months later than our previous video. The final turn of our Nazca playthrough in Yet Again Unto the Breach, and victory. I hadn't originally recorded a video for this episode, which is why I've been delayed in coming around and actually doing it well after the fact. So I'm just going to turn off those filters to prevent the map lagging now that we have the Eyes of God effect from completing the game. So I'm going to be speaking largely from memory here rather than the contemporaneous notes that I was taking through most of the game. But essentially what happened as the final turn came in, I'll take us through the turn and then I'll explain sort of what it was like at the time, and we'll go from there. I think everything's showing as independent now, is it? There we are. I'm not sure why that is. Give me 1 second. Alright, I don't know how to fix the map, but I guess it's mostly irrelevant to the situation at hand. So the final turn of this game was thankfully less exciting and engaging than it could have been, and that was largely because there was a lack of communication between Tianqi and Orm, in that both assumed the other, I assume both thought the other was going to keep me off their throne for at least a turn longer, which made it possible to do a double claim and surprise everybody. So there was a couple of battles. Asphodel took a fort that we gave them permission to take, so we unfortunately didn't get a Huron out of there in mind, but that's okay. Ermel continued raiding Uruk. Vanarus started trying to raid back some land from Orm. Facia pushed in and continued to... Tianqi was collapsing as the game ended. There was some raiding, I believe, by us in Shem and Salt Plains. We lost in one but not the other. We conquered a province off Tianqi using our Sapphires. This was all just us pushing in. But, critically speaking, there weren't actually... Our enemies weren't actually able to put together assaults on the throne provinces in time. And that was the critical point. While the Tianqi maintained an army in its capital, without its god it didn't have a teleporter able to assault on time, we had established a perimeter around the throne, and Facia was at the proverbial gate, so I understand they were distracted in the end anyway. There was a battle, I believe, there last turn, but that was it. This turn we just claimed it. Similarly, Ulm was starting to move in their response force. There was a flock of Iron Angels that was assembling as well that was going to jump in with this force and take it, but they... take this. But they just assumed that, one, we were too strong for what they had right there, and so they needed an extra turn, and secondly, they thought they had an extra turn, which in the end it turned out they didn't. Relay was scouting the throne, we killed the scout, and that was about it, but we claimed it. We were very well defended there in the end. So we won. We claimed 2 thrones in 1 turn. We claimed the Crystal Throne and the Throne of Ice, both in the name of Air Taxi to Mordor. And that took us over the points total we needed. So we had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we had exactly the 11 required without having to go to war with Vanarus or with Relay, who was down here. When this game finished, I think the reason I didn't record a video at the time was it was just an absolutely incredible emotional release. So, same as with the previous game where I played Atlantis. That one perhaps even more so because at that point I'd never finished a multiplayer game of Dominions. I played like a test game, and that was about the sum of it. So it was incredible to come up against these people and actually manage to sneak out a win. Here, to do it again was equally exciting in some ways, but I feel that unlike the last game where it was very much a sneaky rush, this game I had sort of the power, the economy, and the position going that I really was in a position to take on all comers by the end of the game. And so I was a little less surprised I was able to eke out a win, but I'm happy that while I feel like I over-prepared for the final rush, I'm satisfied with how it worked. It ran essentially like clockwork. Caught most people by surprise and was able to get us the win. So that's 2 for 2 on GC's channel, which I'm very, very happy with. Now, as at the time that I'm recording this now, I've already done a retrospective with General Confusion that's posted on his channel where we talk a little bit about this game. So I'm not sure if there are any real reflections I want to do now, as opposed to just pointing you over in that direction so you can get 2 perspectives on the game at the same time. There's a few quick things, however, that I will note. Before I go on to starting to try to prepare content for new games and also general guides. Life has unfortunately been very difficult for me recently. Some family members have been quite ill, so I haven't been producing much in the way of content. I do this recreationally, so I look forward to doing a little bit more of that as life gets better. But reflecting on this has cheered me up a little bit. Nazca was a new beast for me. I am naturally comfortable with sort of what you would think of as macroeconomic sort of build nations. I like stuff which has good, affordable, solid troops, decent mages that you take full scales on. The nation has no real weaknesses, and then you build an economy. And the reason I like scales nations is because if you can negotiate relatively equal borders, so fair borders in inverted commas with all your neighbours, you have an advantage, and a significant advantage, over those with bad scales, and even over those with neutral scales, and an advantage that continues to grow through the game as growth compounds on your income. So it gives you there's a lot more diplomatic freedom when you're a scales build nation than when you're a hell scales nation, like Nazca was. Nazca meant that while I was weak for the first 12 turns, I had to go to war after that, otherwise I simply wouldn't be competitive. And even at the end of this game, you'll see I control huge swaths of the maps, almost 100 provinces by the end of the game. And yet, up until right at the end, where I start absorbing huge slews of Chen Chi's territory and some of Orm's territory right in that final rush. This dip here is me taking an Ormish province. Orm basically stays even with me through most of the game and is competitive with me right up to the end of the game, despite having something like a third as many provinces. Now, some of that is because my province count growth in this period of the game accounted for a lot of Amorian provinces, which were obviously revenue dead. They were useless except for the mines and gems that we were able to generate there. But I was constantly aware that to be at the top of this curve, and Nazca I think needs to be at the top of this curve because its non-troop stuff is so expensive. Its mages are really expensive. I needed to expand constantly, and the diplomacy enabled us to do that. The other thing I'll say is that expansion fueled this. This is the gem income lead that we were able to generate as the game went on. And that enabled us to run sort of an economy parallel to our gold economy. It allowed us to pay for items from Orm, which I'll talk about in a bit, and to fuel a lot of late game magic and summoning. Endgame would not have been possible without our ludicrous levels of gem income. He simply wouldn't. Where is Endgame? There he is. So yeah, you don't wish for and divine name and fully kit a Seraph for casting purposes unless you have stupid amounts of gems, which I did, luckily, by game end. How were we able to make that happen? I think there's two separate reflections I want to make. One is on diplomacy and one is on Nazca the nation. When we started this, let's talk about Nazca first. When I started this, I said, not nation overview, pretenders of the world followed by attacks in Mordor. Yeah. When I started this, I made the observation that I thought the Hatun Runa was the absolute king of the Nazcan lineup. At least in terms of underappreciated value. Everyone appreciates the Supaya, everyone appreciates the Sacreds and the Condors. That was really known, but I hadn't seen a huge amount of reference to the Hatun Runa and the potential of this unit. The potential of the Hatun Runa, I think, was borne out this game. It allowed me to cheaply set up recruitment centers, no matter how many resources, how many recruitment points there were in a place, because it allows you to scale production infinitely in a province. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we had 8 slave capturers in a province with 75 recruitment points. Find me a way that you can do, let's see, 8 4s, 8, 16, 24, 32, plus the 8d6. So you would have to be recruiting 2 recruitment point troops in this province to rival the sort of production rate that you were getting here. They'd have to be incredibly cheap on resources. And the kicker is, we can still use our resources and recruitment points because capturing slaves bypasses the recruitment points and resource requirements. All you need is 40 gold, 7 resources, and 1 commander point for a summoner who will work until the end of days. And that allowed us, once we got past the earliest parts of the game, it allowed us to patrol all of our provinces. It allowed us to produce armies really quickly by giving us meat to surround our sacreds, surround our mages, surround our killing power, essentially. Suck up enemy evocations, crack fortresses, garrison fortresses and hold up the walls, raid. Stacks of Hatun Runa with morale boosts and a little bit of assistance could raid low PD provinces relatively well, while costing nothing. While costing close to nothing. A commander with 40 Hatun Runa was costing us like less than 100 gold. If there are nations that can't send out 3 troops for 100 gold. A Morvark Knight by itself from Ys can't raid, but a Morvark Knight costs more than what one of our raiding groups cost. And that told, I suppose, throughout the game. And it's borne out by this. Our troop growth kept on track with Celeria and Ermor, and then eclipsed both. Not just because we attacked Ermor. We don't attack Ermor until this point in the game here. I think that's Ermor. Yeah. Because, yes, Ermor is taking constant losses, but you can see their production isn't scaling as aggressively as Celeria's was starting to. So Celeria's was starting to ramp up in terms of production. And here it looks like Celeria could have beaten us in terms of troop production. That's entirely possible, but bear in mind that I wasn't recruiting anywhere near the maximal number of Hatun Runa. On paper, if supplies weren't an issue, the ability to recruit for 40 gold and without a temple technically makes Apu superior in terms of raw number generation than Celerian cultists. So you get more Hatun Runa than you would get long dead, all else being equal. You can recruit them in areas with less infrastructure. You can recruit them in just as large numbers. They have more upkeep once you kill them, obviously, and turn them into Malki. They're more expensive than Celerian cultists at 56 gold a year. But they also generate more units. The 4 plus D6 roll, or whatever it is, I spoke correctly at the start of this series. I can't recall what it is now, because the numbers all blurred together after a while. I was just generating a few hundred in my empire every single turn, and could never possibly lose enough to make up for my generation rate. Was incredibly impressive and incredibly valuable. And it gave us time to expand and get to the point where by the end of the game we were generating, 30, 40 free sacreds a turn in terms of suppliers, and we were summoning condors for another 17 per turn. Sorry, 15 per turn with the nerf by game end. At which point we were generating 50, 60, about 50 sacreds a turn plus our mages. And that was really, at that point you're just pumping out an army every turn, and no one else is in a position to match that because their upkeeps are starting to get in their way. The slave economy did its job. You can just see the bulk of the forces that we have around that enabled our empire to suppose get the mass that otherwise our complete lack of income would prevent us from accessing. The other critical part of this game, I think, was diplomacy. I think I have semi-controversial views in the Dominions community on diplomacy, and I've seen a lot of comments on my videos that are essentially saying that All made a terrible choice by trading me Lightless Lanterns. This game involved me trading with a lot of people, none more so than Orm. It involved me cooperating with lots of people, including at times Ermor. I had a treaty with GC through the entire game. I had a relationship that I established with Ys, with Orm. I had a very close relationship with Facia and Shiniyama, to the point where if this throne rush had failed, I was prepared to hand one of my thrones over to Shiniyama to get people off my back, and then just make sure these guys got their share of Tianqi's territory so they were back in the game. That's just the way I enjoy playing. I enjoy working with people, and I think it's more of a strict dominant strategy than we see in Dominions a lot of the time. There are other simulation style competitions where what you'll see quite quickly usually is people group up into one or two massive groups before time on is even called, and then either immediately attack each other or start cannibalizing internally. And then there being political machinations. I don't see much of that in Dominions. It's very much played as a war game with a very protectionist attitude by most people. I think trade in Dominions is usually a better idea than not trading. Do I think Orm was silly to trade me Lightless Lanterns? I think it depends on how you look at it. And I think there's a strong defense for him in this case. It's very clear that working with me enabled Orm, and I reflect on this in the GC video, enabled Orm to get into a strong second place in this game. By the end of the game, they were the second most powerful actor on the board. And if, as they expected, when I fought Ermor, I had been ground to a halt, or if, as they also expected, a coalition would assemble and had fought me and deconstructed me slowly at great cost to themselves, Orm would have almost certainly won this game. They were winning at the end of this game a three-way war with Machaka, Vanarus, and Ys, and they make no mistake, they were winning. And they had the resources to continue winning. Their economy was almost as large as mine. You can see how large my economy was by the end. Go check the videos of GC, and you can see by comparison where other people were in this game. They had researched almost everything in the game. They had the gems that I'd supplied them had enabled them to forge huge amounts of gear and summon units across the board. So they were in very good shape. Were they wrong to do that? In retrospect, if they had known exactly what would have turned out elsewhere, then yes. But I think that's because they failed to have enough intelligence on where Ermor was and how likely a coalition against me from other powers was. Other than that, it would have been an excellent decision. I also think that it's unfair in terms of straight comparison, because if anything, I did more trading than anyone else, and every time it occurred, even when it didn't favour me on paper, it favoured me relative to every other player. So the way I think about this is, if I engage in trade with someone like Ermor, and it makes me 6 points stronger and him 10 points stronger, my position relative to him has decreased by 4 points, but my position relative to everyone else has increased by 6. The solution to avoid this problem is simply to trade with Ermor, with Orm, with Tianqi, with Facia, with Shiniyama, with everyone who's existing on that, with Machaka, with everyone. And by trading with everyone, as I did in this game, none more so than Orm, but by trading with everyone, you can ensure that you gain a relative advantage over all the people you're trading with, even if your trades with them don't generate a relative advantage with that person. And that is what I will stick to. It's why I will always honour my naps. It's why I will approach people for deals. It's why I will try and act in good conscience to try and win people over and keep friends. But ultimately in this game, the most important friendships turned out to be the one with Ermor and Asphodel, which provided me peace until later in the game. The treaty with Machaka, which secured my southern flank, but most importantly Orm. Because Orm's first few turns of Lightless Lantern trade with me were critical for enabling me to get my own research online. Now, if he had cut selling me Lightless Lanterns, say 20% of the way through what he actually did, so only a few turns, I still could have gone const 6 and made them myself. I was the one generating the fire gems, not him. I was the one with Eternal Pyre, not him. I didn't have Eternal Pyre at the end of the game, but I had it for a lot of the game. At the end of the game, I threw up Wrath of God instead. I had the fire gems, I had earth gem income, I was able to make hammers. I did make 1 or 2 hammers and generate the items myself. I just continued trading because I wanted goodwill and because it was slightly more efficient. But I could have done it myself. So I think it's a bit of a furphy to say that he could have stopped me by cutting the supply there. I think it just would have soured our relationship earlier and forced me to turn inward, which may not have been good for him, given I know he had ambitions. I think the most critical part of all of this diplomatic outlook was to make sure that I was trading early and often, which solved my gem issue and my research issue at different points in the game. Gems early on to get condors, and trading with Orm later on to get research. I think that was important. And the other thing was to make sure that I never fought more than one war at the same time. And they were always wars that I chose to fight. I chose to commence the war with Pythium after they challenged me over this province, and no one else fought me at the same time. I then was hired to fight Uruk by Orm, which meant I would have an ally, who ended up not helping at all, but I had a technical ally, and I fought Uruk alone because of the way the front was shaped. Then I was able to fight Vanheim with the blessing of Vanarus and the participation of Orm again. Then I was able to switch up and fight Ermor at the request of several other people while not fighting anyone else. The ability to focus down one enemy at a time might be inefficient for some nations, because having to move all your forces in dominions takes so many turns that in a 57 turn game, walking from here to here is a big ask, especially if it's actually not from here to here, it's from here to here, as the case was. But when you're jumping and moving 2 provinces per turn, 3 provinces per turn, suddenly one war at a time with everything concentrated and then redeploying everything worked out really, really well. So I appreciated Nazca's strategic mobility and the freedom that allowed me to play the diplomatic game the way I want to play it, with as many friends as possible, with as much trade as possible, and then concentrating on one threat at a time with the blessing and the support of my neighbours. Would I have gone to war with Uruk if Orm had not hired me? No, I would not have. I would have had to look elsewhere. But eventually I would have found an option. And if I hadn't, I would have faced the prospect of fighting a war alone, which I would have done out of desperation and a desire not to stagnate. But it's something I try and avoid at all costs. But once I'm in a war, I try and fight it with absolutely all the resources at my disposal. I don't like people who join wars and then half-ass things. If I'm in, I'm in. We talked about... I'm not sure I'll ever post the videos on my previous game, but I do talk about this in last game when I had the back and forth of treaties with Relay in the middle and late game, where people thought we were faking our war. In reality, what we had was peace treaty, broken peace treaty, broken peace treaty. That worked better this game in that Mr. Root, the person playing Orm, proved to be slightly more reliable this time around, but I still don't trust the bloke. Seems like a good guy. I still don't trust him entirely to not have a scheme, but it's Dominions. You should have a scheme, I guess. So I won't wax lyrical. I already have talked on for a while. I was really happy with the way this game played. It was done by the numbers. It was wrapped up by turn 57. It was probably decided by turn 50, if not the mid-late 40s. I learnt some lessons. I'm pained watching the earliest parts of this video in terms of how I mishandled Nazca's troops and used line formations instead of boxes, and just didn't understand how the birds worked. But by the end, I think I found, if not the most effective, a relatively effective way to use Nazca's troops, and it served me well in the end, guiding air taxi to Mordor to Ascension. So thank you so much for watching. Please do go have a look at the debrief video I did with General Confusion on his channel. Leave any of your comments or observations or questions. I'm not sure if I'll do a further retrospective. I will if there's demand. Otherwise, I'm going to get back to nation analyses and maybe putting videos out over about an accidental Ascension game that I'm in, where I've once again randomly rolled Late Age Atlantis. So again, let me know if that's something you want to hear about, or whether you'd rather wait for another game to come along. I think GC will be starting another one soon, and if my family life has come together, I'll be in that as well. So thank you so much for everyone who's engaged and commented and watched and been very patient with my upload schedule, and I'll see you again soon.